Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. I wanted to let you know, I think since everyone's sharing their own screen, is it all right if everyone introduces themselves, or would you rather something different?
I think it'll be faster if we just quickly introduce ourselves.
Okay, that's fine. Is everyone else okay with that?
Joan has disappeared.
Yes.
Is Joan there?
I see her. Joan, you're on mute right now, but I see you.
Yeah, I'm here. I didn't go anywhere.
Good. Good.
Ah, you can just do it.
Can I try and share my screen really quickly? Oh.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Senator Clarkson.
Hello, it's good to see you. Oh, Caitlin, when don't we start? Given it's now 2.
I'm sorry?
It's 2.
Yes, okay, perfect. It's 2. Okay. I believe we will start then. Let me just share.
And
my
are you
screen.
going to do the CSG introduction and the introducing the sponsors and all that? Okay, great.
Yes. It looks like I am disabled from screen sharing, if anyone can fix that.
Caitlin, you should be able to now.
Oh, Caitlin, Josh is also one of the presenters, and he is not, I don't see him here.
I don't
Okay.
either.
Could anyone from the technical team put him as a speaker? Okay, I think I see him here. Okay, perfect. In that case, we will get started, I believe. Everything's okay. Sorry, can I get a confirmation that we can start?
You're good, Caitlin.
Okay, perfect. Then we will get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CSG ERC Apprenticeships A Pathway to Licensure session. Today we will be joined by Senator Allison Clarkson, Director Joan Dolan from the Maine Department of Labor, Nirav Shah from Social Finance, and lastly, Corey Johnson and Josh Gaines from the CSG Justice Center. This session was, and these speakers were brought together by the Occupational Licensure Project at the Center of Innovation with CSG. The project is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor and partners with the National Conference of State Legislators and the National Governors Association since 2017. Occupational licensure has increased in importance since the number of jobs requiring an occupational license has risen from about 1 in 20 to now about 1 in 4. However, the differences in requirements for obtaining an occupational license across state lines has created barriers to licensure and made it more difficult for workers to move across state lines. The Occupational Licensure Project works toward removing these barriers and identifying best practices for increasing portability and reciprocity. One of these identified best practices is expanding apprenticeship programs, and the Occupational Licensure Project has worked toward sharing that knowledge by publishing a series of policy briefs about apprenticeships. and how those can aid in removing barriers to licensure. Some also include apprenticeships towards certain groups, such as immigrants with work authorization or dislocated minors, as well as featuring on a number of panels about apprenticeships and other best practices in occupational licensure. Just some quick reminders. After this speakers present, there will be a question and answer session. And I ask that all participants submit questions in the chat. To ensure that the speakers can be heard clearly, please also remain on mute while they are presenting. And lastly, the session will be recorded and hosted at licensing.csg.org/webinars. And after that, I will give it over to, I believe, Director Joan will go first.
Well, I think we're going together. I'm Allison Clarkson. I'm a senator in Vermont. I'm vice chair of Senate Economic Development and Housing and General Affairs. And before COVID hit us, my last international trip was with Joan Dolan. Joan, you want to introduce yourself and then we'll launch?
Yep, thank you, Allison. Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Joan Dolan, and I am the Director of Apprenticeship and Strategic Partnerships for the Maine Department of Labor. We work out of Augusta in the central part of Maine, and it's a position I've held for the past 10 years and become very passionate about apprenticeships, and I'm going to let Allison kick us off.
Okay, well, we were lucky enough to go on this trip together to Berlin, 17 of us in October of 19, and met a number of legislators and professionals. Joan was one of the people who actually knew what she was really talking about, which it was a real treat to have her along. I think we'd love to pull up the first slide, if that's okay. The trip to Germany, the purpose of the trip to Germany was to learn more about the dual education system, and it was sponsored by the Council of State Governments, Eastern Trade Council, and the German American Chamber of Commerce. The purpose of the CSG is to facilitate the exchange of ideas and information among state and provincial policymakers, business leaders, and the academic community. And all of us were represented on this trip. It was really a rich community to travel with and to engage in these meetings. We met with everything from all walks, from a whole range of businesses, from the Waldorf Astoria to government entities, and it was just really stimulating trip. Germany, as you may know, is the 7th largest country in Europe and one of its most important economic engines. It's about the size of Montana. The population is about 82 million, and Germany has 16 individual states, all of which figure into the apprenticeship scene. University is free for everyone in Germany, including refugees, those who've chosen to live there, and all non-Germans. And we went to learn about this internationally renowned dual education apprenticeship system. Over centuries, Germany has developed a robust apprenticeship program. In 1181, in the 12th century, the first certificate of apprenticeship was issued for a wood turner in Germany, and they have been honing the system ever since. Now there are 326 professions have programs of earn to learn. So dual enrollment apprenticeships, 75% working and learning and 25% in the classroom. Despite this, the biggest workforce challenge in Germany is to find skilled workers. Just as in America, upskilling of the German workforce is becoming more and more important. In Germany, about 50% of the students leave general education, early education, where everyone is in the same boat. And after the 9th, 10th, or 12th grade, they make their way into a world of work via vocational, educational, and training, known as VET. One particularly common form of VET is the dual education system. And so I think we wanted to go to slide number 2.
Right, it would be slide number 8, I think, right now. But I think looks like we're having a little challenge with the slides, so we'll just
Okay.
keep it
So
moving.
I'm just going to keep going because we don't have much time. Germany shares borders with 9 other countries with a gross domestic product of about 3.7 trillion US dollars, and is, as I said, the fourth largest economy behind the US, China, and Japan. Germany is one of the largest car manufacturers, including Volkswagen, Mercedes, Audi, and BMWs. 1.4 million young people in Germany are currently participating in the dual education system. This system of studying and working is the foundation of a vocational education in Germany, and is highly prestigious, as I said, worldwide. And the key to its success is dual vocational education and training, which focuses on learning by doing. In a company, they are employed by a company, and thus it increases retention by combining practical and theoretical training. They have about a 68% retention rate for these people who go through this system. Roughly 3/4 of their time is spent working, and 1/4 of their time is spent in school while they're going through this program. Employers invest 26 billion euros in this program, and the state government, the school, invests about 9 billion. So you can see there's a huge employer engagement and investment in this. The dual education system in Germany refers to these 2 learning venues used to educate the youth of Germany. The education partners are comprised of individual businesses, as I said, and public vocational schools. The vocational education training system enjoys a great reputation in Germany, and in general leads much more quickly to occupational income than a university education does. Later academic study, or a combination of vocational educational training and university education are also possible. So you can finish your apprenticeship and then go to university afterwards. And in fact, one of their challenges now is that so many people are choosing to take a sidebar and go to university after they finish their apprenticeship programs. This delegation that Joan and I were part of, that we came from 10 different Northeastern states, and we visited, we just had a wonderful time in Berlin. If you're offered an opportunity to go on a CSG Eastern Trade Council trip, take it, because it was really one of the most stimulating things we did. Our delegation had legislators, international trade specialists, professionals, economic and community development specialists, and Joan, who was our sole program director. So Joan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Allison. And as Allison said, I think it's super important to know that the dual vet standards, which on the previous slide, it showed what dual vet meant, what dual vet means. They're based on the requirements of work. Training standards are continually updated and new standards added in Germany. As a rule, the development of the training standards for each occupation define the content of the training at both locations. And again, it's really employer driven. It's what does the employer need? It's not based on that's what the professor has been teaching for the last 20 years. It's based on this is what the world of work needs right now. And as we know, in this day and age, it's rapidly changing. If you could go to the next slide, that would be wonderful. In Germany, there's 2 different arms to apprenticeship. There's what they call the Handwerkskammer, which is similar to our labor unions in the United States. And there are 1 million craft companies in Germany, 53 different chambers of skilled crafts. So think about, your plumbers, your electricians, your carpenters, machinists, all of those are part of the Handwerkskammer. Membership for businesses that do those types of things is compulsory, so people are required, and that's where I think that we couldn't just take the German system and plunk it here in the United States, because not everybody would be on board with something being required of a business to do. They employ 5.5 million employees, and of that 5.5 million, about 7%, or 363,000 of them, are actually apprentices. And so unlike in the United States, It's just an expectation that the businesses are going to invest in developing their workforce. And I think that's another big difference in the United States. And with our labor shortages that are everywhere, particularly acute in rural states such as Maine and Vermont, you know, I think that it's businesses are figuring out, we can't just expect that somebody's going to show up at our door and be, you know, I'm going to have 20 people applying for that one skilled job. They'll be lucky if they get 2 people applying and they may not even have the skills or qualifications. And apprenticeship can help to fill that gap. It costs each business $410 a year to join the chamber. And then the companies are responsible for wages, which are 1/3 of the journey worker's wage. And that word journey worker is an apprentice wage that I spend a lot of time explaining to businesses, that a journey worker is a person that is fully skilled to perform the requirements of the job. And they're not in training, they are, so they're not a master, so they're not completely really wonderful at it, but they're definitely proficient to go off and do their own thing on the job. If you could go to the next slide, that would be great. The second side of the apprenticeship system in Germany is for all the apprenticeship occupations that are not the trades. So if you basically think Handwerkskammer is for the trades, and the German chambers of commerce are different than the chambers of commerce here in the United States. And they do all the occupations that you can see, the apprenticeship examples there. They're all for the non-craft apprenticeships, 330 occupations. But again, all of the businesses are required to join. It's not an option. You have to pay in. And it's a sliding fee for these businesses, dependent on the size of the company. So the smaller the company, the less the fee, the bigger the company, the bigger the fee. If you could go to the next one, that would be wonderful. I think many of you are probably not familiar with what is apprenticeship anyway. You know, I know everybody has their own definition in their head of what apprenticeship is. In the United States, registered apprenticeship has a very specific definition. It's a very flexible training model that can be adjusted to meet the needs of business, even if it's, you know, two businesses that are hiring carpenters. If one is doing, you know, fine carpentry for cabinets, and another one is doing, you know, framing for a house, you know, it's not, a carpenter is not a carpenter, it's not a carpenter. We can customize what we call the schedule of work, or what the apprentice is going to learn on the job. And it's important to note that apprenticeship is a paid job. It's not somebody that's going to be doing work for free. It's against federal labor laws to do work for free. So people need to get paid, and there's minimums that go along with that. And the other piece that often surprises people is that it includes at least 144 hours of classroom training that supports the on-the-job learning that the apprentice is undertaking. Has to be at least a year in length, and has a wage increase that's agreed to when the apprentice signs on. And I think probably most important for this conversation is that it's a national portable credential that's earned. So if you earn a credential in New Jersey, you should be able to take it to Maine and be recognized. There might be some licensing, additional licensing board requirements, but the basics of the education and the on-the-job learning should be met. It should be transportable from state to state. Apprenticeship has grown exponentially since 2011, 70% growth. And 69% of all apprentices in the United States are found in the construction sector, but we're really moving into more of the non-trade crafts at this point in time. The other difference between Germany and the United States is that 94% of most of the apprentices in the United States are adults. The average age of an apprentice in the United States is like 28 or 29 years old. In Maine, it's 32, because we're the oldest state in the nation. And I think that that's something that we really need to change in this country, is we need to connect our youth to work experiences and to learning on the job and all of those things that they do so wonderfully in Germany, to apprenticeship, because then they're getting a structured curriculum on the job learning combined with a structured classroom training. And if you want more information on apprenticeship, there's a website there that you could check out. It's a great federal website that has lots of information. Next slide, please. I was asked to talk a little bit about the healthcare apprenticeship programs that we have in Maine. And we have about 10% of our apprenticeship programs in our state are in the healthcare realm and in those 4 occupations that you see over there on the left-hand side of the screen. Nursing residency programs of a year long with additional classroom training for nurses who have already gone through a 2 or 4 year nursing program, and then to get them up to speed with what they need to do to be effective as nurses on the floor. They've adopted these nurse residency apprenticeship programs. And it's actually increased retention of people a lot. And then there's specialty nursing programs. So to become an emergency room nurse or a critical care nurse, different things that they need to learn on the job to be good at that. Medical assistants and certified nursing assistants. And then we're working on, I'm just going to talk about the one that I'm most excited about, which is actually the certified nursing assistant to licensed practical nurse. We're developing an apprenticeship for that. And I know they're also working on that in Virginia and in Montana and in Washington state at this point in time. And it's going to be targeted towards high school students and having them earn their CNA license when they're in junior in high school, and then move on into the licensed practical nurse through on-the-job learning and sitting for their license exam at the end of that. You go to the next slide, please. And just had some recommendations, and I see that we're pretty much out of time. So I think we won't have time to really go through all of these.
But we had some takeaways, though, that Joan has already alluded to. I mean, the first takeaway is really we need to focus on practical application of knowledge at a much earlier age. In Vermont, we're working on getting kids with individual pathways beginning in 7th and 8th grade. And I know Joan is having already mentioned it. It's one of our biggest takeaways is that we have to do this earlier, and we need apprentices beginning at a much younger age. The second one, I don't know if we have time to go through all these, but you can read them. We need to develop youth pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeship opportunities in collaboration with employers, high schools, community colleges, and workforce partners. We need to identify companies willing to engage and invest. The key thing is companies really need to understand and appreciate the value of apprenticeships. And they need to become intermediary sponsors of apprenticeships. So that's a big work I think America has to undertake in that regard, is really educating the employers on the value of apprenticeship. Germany has had centuries of appreciating this. And we need to engage the youth to provide peer-to-peer promotion of apprenticeship programs and unleash them on social media. We need young people selling to each other the excitement and the opportunities here. Joan, do you want to do the last group?
Sure. I think we sort of touched on the first bullet, and then encourage the education systems to develop flexible individual learning plans for all students. I think we're starting to move to a more flexible schedule, not being so semester based in our delivery of classroom training. And also we need to really look at the learner at the high school level and say, what is it that this individual needs? Take a look at those states if you're interested in learning more about what really high quality pre-apprenticeship programming looks like. And I think we can also address the needs of new Americans, licensing and skills upgrading, and maybe even recognizing the skills that they've brought with them from another country. I know in Maine, we have people that used to be doctors in their home country, and they can't even be certified nursing assistants in Maine, which is, we need to fix that. I think apprenticeship can help that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's all we have. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And we're happy to take questions later because there's lots more.
Thank you both so much for that presentation. I believe now we will move on to Nirav Shah from Social Finance.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to CSG for allowing me to be part of the conversation, and thank you to Senator Clarkson and Joan for that overview of the apprenticeship. And I'm hoping that as part of this panel, I get an invite to the next Berlin trip. That sounds like a ton of fun and a good learning experience. So again, my name is Nirav Shah. I'm a vice president at Social Finance. We're a nonprofit organization. You can advance the next slide, please. We're one more after this. We're a nonprofit organization that's been around for 10 years, and we're best known as one of the pioneers of the Pay for Success movement. And Pay for Success, in short, is how do we better use evidence, data, outcomes measurement to create rapid feedback loops so we understand what programs are working the best and making sure we're aligning policy and funding towards those programs is kind of one big component. The second component of Pay for Success is really around how do we braid and leverage capital, both from the public sector and the private capital, to get to scale. So we all know that we are facing a number of challenges, not least in the workforce development space, and scale is going to be important, but scale without impact is not helpful. That's why all of our work is centered around outcomes. A core part of our work has been around economic mobility. And so that's the reason that we have been invited to this conversation, is to share a couple of different strategies that we've worked with both in the public sphere as well as the private sphere to amplify impact by scaling programs that work, including apprenticeships. You can fast forward 2 slides, one more after this. And so I wanted to, again, talk about 2 initiatives. The first one is a relatively new strategy to address a real need, and this need won't be a surprise to anyone else listening to this conversation. There are real barriers to access for, especially when you start talking about individuals with low income, individuals of color, individuals that haven't had the opportunities that many of us have had. And those barriers can be financial in nature. They can be access in nature and geographically not prominent around where individuals live. So there's many of these barriers, and some of these barriers are really high. And what we found is that there is a unique space where there, especially for short duration credentialing and training programs, where there isn't financing from your traditional Title IV programs, whether it be student loans or Pell Grants, that is a limitation for individuals to get onto pathways of economic mobility. And we've devised a new strategy, what we're calling the Career Impact Bond. It's a distinct form of an income sharing agreement targeted for individuals that are low income and traditionally face barriers to access. And for folks who are not familiar, the income share agreement is a model that individuals finance education, short duration training and credentialing programs, and their repayment is contingent upon their ability to maintain or to get a good job and maintain that job. So it's all based on the level of salary that you get. And I can, after this slide, I will go through an example. So we've taken this income share agreement and put 2 innovations on it. One, we've attached wraparound services to this. So what we found in our work over the last 10 years, especially with this population, is that life often gets in the way of persisting through a workforce training program, whether that be an economic shock to someone in their family where they have to get out of the program and get a job right away, whether it is transportation, whether it is childcare. So for each of the projects we're putting together, we're understanding the target population, the geography, and think about what other kind of wraparound services can we attach to these programs to ensure that individuals are actually persisting through the training and workforce program. So that's kind of innovation number 1. Second piece is that we are making this student friendly. So we put a student friendly Bill of Rights to all of our income sharing agreements. We are putting terms to put the individual's financial security first and foremost through the duration of the project. And I'll get into an example in a moment. We are currently using 2 different vehicles, if you will, to scale this Career Impact Bond strategy. We've put together a $50 million impact investment fund, which we're calling the UP Fund, which sits outside of the public sphere. And we have impact investors putting up money to go into programs that allow individuals to get access to programs they otherwise wouldn't have access to. Second is we're putting together what we're calling the pay it forward funds, using public funds as the catalyst for career impact bonds for students of different target populations for different sectors. I'm going to come back to this pay it forward fund, but I want to, if we can advance the next slide, I want to make this concept a little bit more concrete with a real life example. So we, in partnership with a coding bootcamp called General Assembly, launched this is our first career impact bond project. And for those of you who are not familiar, General Assembly is a best-in-class coding bootcamp. They offer a 14-week program at a cost around $15,000 for that program. Traditionally, their population has eluded individuals with low incomes, especially with individuals of color, because there are real barriers to access, largely financial. So one of the bigger barriers were if individuals in General Assembly is not eligible for your traditional student loans, federally mandated or backed student loans, or Pell Grants. So individuals either had to put up $15,000 out of their pocket, which many individuals don't have. Many individuals were challenged that they couldn't forego working while going through a 14-week program. And they couldn't access credit from the private markets because their credit was dinged. And so we formulated this career impact bond strategy, and the target population is specifically individuals that have low income. So we have income threshold as the eligibility criteria, poor credit histories, or individuals coming out of the incarceration system, or is exclusively who we're focusing this program on. And the way we've set up the terms is that an individual is not required to pay unless they get a job of $40,000 coming out of the program. Their share of the income, if they do hit a job above $40,000, is 10%. That is a repayment. At a maximum, they'll never pay more than 1.5x the financing they've taken out. So if you've taken out $15,000, you owe $22,500. If you pay that in 2 years, then your obligation is over. And then another factor we put in there for student friendliness is that there will be no payments after 4 years. So if you do not pay back your financing after 4 years, your obligation is over. So this is kind of an example of how the income sharing agreement can work. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to this, we put an emergency cash fund that's available to students who need cash assistance as part of this program. There's access to a counselor to help with any needs that individuals have outside of the training program to ensure that, again, they're persisting in the program. The table to the right is one that we're very proud of, just to talk about the focus on populations that haven't traditionally had access to these type of programs. So the traditional General Assembly makeup, you had 48% of the individuals were white, 6% Black, 6% Latinx. If you look at our program, we have 38% of the population that's Black and 14% that's Latinx. So we're seeing more populations, again, that traditionally have barriers to access that are getting access to these type of programs that they're otherwise not getting to. So this is kind of an example of the Career Impact Bond. We've used, again, that $50 million impact investment fund to scale this up. As the pandemic, we can flip to the next slide. As the pandemics ensued and some of the stimulus funds started coming out of the federal government and trickling down, we realized there was an opportunity to have a similar vehicle in the public sphere. And we're calling this, again, the Pay It Forward Fund. Let me try to walk through how this works. So on the left-hand side here, we have a government funded vehicle, and using stimulus dollars or funds appropriated to that jurisdiction that sits in an account. That account then allows, let's say if there's $10 million, I'm going to make up a fictitious example just to play this out. If there's $10 million sitting in a fund today, that $10 million can serve 5,000 individuals through apprenticeship program or an array of workforce development programs. That individual then goes through a training program. As they go out and get employed, and they get employed at a salary that's above the threshold, and they start making repayments on this income share agreement, that repayment gets funneled all the way back to that fund in the beginning. And so now you can serve another cohort of individuals. So one of the big key factors and the advantages of this is that one-time dollars can be deposited into this fund, and now it can revolve. So then therefore you can serve a number of different cohorts. So this is one idea that right now we're working with about 7 different jurisdictions at the state and at the city municipal level to think about how this pay it forward strategy can work within their existing workforce development goals to identify pathways for individuals to who have financial barriers to access can now get a vehicle that allow them to get access to economic mobility. We're in the process in the first quarter of 2022, we expect to launch our first career impact bond with an apprenticeship program in the IT sector that we're extremely excited about because there's lots of opportunities to have individuals working as in a job as part of their training program, so you know that your skills are going to match what the employer's needs are. Another piece of excitement here is we're starting to get engagement from employers to start paying back the financing on behalf of the students. In one of our career impact bonds with the American Diesel Training Center, a number of employers are already starting to repay the financing on behalf of individuals they've employed through the program. And so we're trying to find more creative ways to get employers at the table to either take in individuals that have the right credentialing that meets their labor force needs, but also help putting in some financial skin in the game to ensure that individuals are financially set up that they can stay in their company or in their sector for a long period of time. So that's kind of the pay it forward strategy, and happy to discuss more about it. This is a quick snapshot. This slide is a quick snapshot of some of the jurisdictions that we're working with to implement and launch a pay it forward fund. Most notably, New Jersey and Ohio are 2 areas that we're working in. Florida are 3 areas that we're working in right now, but there's a number of other geographies that we're having discussions with, again, at the state and municipal level. Think it's a prime opportunity for stimulus funds, especially as many governments through our conversations are grappling with how do we use this one-time fund to not inflate our budget and then create an ongoing, but inflate the size of our budget till we can't afford in future years. And this is potentially a good one-time use of those fundings that can, again, revolve and recycle to serve many more individuals. So that's kind of strategy number 1. Strategy number 2 is work that we've been doing for a long time since our organization started. Please advance to the next slide. And we're working with the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority on an outcomes-based contracting to help get more individuals onto clean energy workforce development pathways. And the focus of this initiative is really around how do we use data and specifically focus on outcomes to prove the benefit of workforce development strategies in order to try to get more funding over time into these very successful strategies. So it's using data and outcomes to make a return on investment case that allows increase of funding for these types of programs to advance not only the economic engine of the geography, but also to identify pathways for individuals that are in poverty to get them out of poverty. And in this project, there is a federal pay for success legislation that was passed in 2018, I believe, called the Social Impact Partnerships to Pay for Results Act, CIPRA. It's a long acronym, we did not create it. And so we partnered with New York State to apply to this federal pot of money, and were awarded $8.2 million. And so NYSERDA is using their own budget dollars to fund the workforce development programs. And we're looking at the specific outcomes of earnings increase relative to a group of individuals that don't have access to these programs. And if this program proves successful in increasing earnings for this population that goes through clean energy workforce development programs, there's going to be a payment that comes in from the federal government down to New York State Energy Research and Development Authority in order to then use that funding to further scale up the program around workforce development, all outcomes contingent. In one of these models, we are also looking at programs that can be or apprenticeships where individuals are getting a combination of training in a classroom type setting, but are also then being placed with employers to round out their education in with a specific employer that can be a pathway to further career advancement. And so these are examples of two different strategies that we're using to help people get on pathways of economic mobility and are hoping to incorporate more of the apprenticeship model. So I'm going to pause there, and I know there's other exciting topics coming, but happy to take questions at the end if time remains. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation. Also, as another reminder, any questions you have, just submit them in the chat and we will get to them at the end. Now we will hear from Corey Johnson and Josh Gaines from the CSG Justice Center.
Can everyone hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Johnson. I'm super excited to be here. I'm a senior policy analyst at the CSG Justice Center. I am joined by my colleague, Josh Gaines, who is a project manager, also on the economic mobility team. For those who are not familiar with the CSG Justice Center, just a little bit about us. CSG Justice Center is the criminal justice arm of CSG that's focused on helping states improve their criminal justice system. At the economic mobility team, we are particularly interested in eliminating barriers to the workforce and establishing pathways to meaningful employment for formerly incarcerated individuals. This is particularly important during in the wake of COVID. We recognize that now more than ever, as Narav stated, now more than ever during the pandemic, with some states achieving some of the highest unemployment rates that they've seen in a very long time. Maryland, I think, nearly tripled its unemployment rate. It's important to recognize that unemployment has been more pronounced for formerly incarcerated individuals. If you look at this slide here, the unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated or individuals with a criminal record, it's 27%. When compared to individuals that do not have a criminal record, the unemployment rate is 6%. That unemployment rate is even more pronounced across different demographics, particularly racial demographics. If we look to this right here, this graph right here, Black women who have a criminal record or a past conviction, the unemployment rate is 43.6%. Relative to white women, which is 23.2%. These rates are very concerning, as we've identified that employment has a direct relationship with public safety. We believe that employment is key to successful reentry. Recidivism rates decrease about 6.7%. When individuals are employed, which kind of leads us to, solution-oriented. How can we focus on successful reentry strategies, and what they look like requires a consideration of legal barriers to employment that encourage positive outcomes. So one of the ways that a bunch of states have been making inways into employment for formerly incarcerated individuals has been through apprenticeships as a gateway to licensure. Apprenticeship programs, as already stated, provide pathways to high-paying professions that certain demographics wouldn't ordinarily have access to, or would need a traditional four-year college degree for. Some examples of legislation in certain states: Maryland just passed an apprenticeship for formerly incarcerated individuals pilot program, which basically provides funding or grants for organizations that provide apprenticeships for formerly incarcerated individuals. And then House Bill 1167, also in Maryland, provides tax credits for apprenticeships for individuals, for organizations that provide apprenticeships for individuals with criminal records. It's important to highlight a little bit of why we chose licensure, because even with the best apprenticeship, there can still be a bunch of different barriers to meaningful employment after the apprenticeship. So just to give you an example of how collateral consequences that are a result of a criminal record could then have a limit on the effectiveness of an apprenticeship program. So an example is in Maryland. In Maryland, there is an apprentice, let's say we're a barber in Maryland. There's an apprentice barber license, which basically gives an individual that is seeking a barber license a 2-year permit to study under a Maryland licensed master barber. And so this permit allows that individual to study under the master barber for about 2,200 hours over the course of 2 years. And then subsequent to completing the 2,200 hours, an individual then can submit an application for the occupational license. Now, if an individual has a criminal record, that occupational license is not guaranteed. And so if that occupational license is not guaranteed, there's a high level of uncertainty, and a lot of individuals are deterred away from actually completing the 2,200 hours because because of the collateral consequences that are associated with the license. So that's kind of where our work comes into play here at the Economic Mobility Team. And that centers around fair chance licensing and eliminating barriers to receiving an occupational license for individuals that are formerly incarcerated or have a criminal record. So just to identify some conviction-based barriers across the country, there are more than 13,000 provisions of state law that create barriers to licensure for formerly incarcerated individuals. A third of those must be imposed without exception if a person has a disqualifying conviction. Now, that doesn't mean that the other 2/3 won't be considered for disqualification. So the other 2/3 individuals could still be subjected to. 3/4 of the 13,000 provisions of state law are indefinite. It doesn't matter when it happened, when you were convicted of the crime. If you were convicted of that crime, that persists indefinitely. Needless to say, with those provisions, many individuals are deterred away from actually participating in an occupational licensure application, even if they're qualified, right? So going back to the example of attempting to obtain a cosmetology or barber's license with a conviction, right? We're gonna spend 1 to 2 years in training or in an apprenticeship, right? $20,000 in, results in expenses or tuition, right? And then there's this criminal conviction that's added into the mix, which makes the licensure very uncertain. Okay, so a lot of individuals are deterred away from even obtaining an occupational license or participating in an apprenticeship program that could lead to an occupational license because of this, high level of uncertainty. So a bunch of states, over half, have enacted broadly applicable fair chance licensing laws in one form or another, and they are based on 3 main principles. And you can see them here. I can read them aloud if that's helpful. But the first is that licensing bodies should have the authority to deny applicants with past convictions that directly relate to the tasks and duties of a licensed activity that licensure would require an appreciable risk to public safety. So making sure that there's that connection between the tasks and duties and the actual past conviction. Second key principle, workers should not be barred from licensure solely on the basis of a past conviction and instead should receive individualized consideration. So what does that look like? Considering the length of time of the conviction, or the relatedness of the conviction or rehabilitation, goes kind of into the second prong of the principles. And then the third key principle is that licensing policies and practices involving determinations about criminal history should be transparent and consistently applied. So individuals that are applying can actually know what the parameters are and how it relates to their past conviction. So we've identified 13 best practices or principle, or how the principles have kind of unfolded in practices across the states. So this is what some states are doing. One is increasing transparency in the application process. So that looks like pre-application eligibility determinations and publishing a list or information that explains how your criminal history could impact your application for an occupational license. Limiting the consideration of certain criminal records to between 5 and 10 years generally is what most states are doing. And then providing statutory guidance on how boards must evaluate criminal histories and what that process looks like. And so most of these best practices are very straightforward, super easy, common sense ways that we can just make sure that we're eliminating eliminating the barriers to employment for formerly incarcerated folks so that they can enter the workforce. And I spoke briefly about the pre-application process, but here's an example in real time of the states that have fully implemented pre-application requirements for individuals. It's about 19, and then there are 2 states that have partially implemented pre-application determinations. And just a little bit more about pre-application determinations. Essentially, an individual or a worker with a criminal record would seek a determination from the board prior to obtaining an apprenticeship, or prior to completing 1 to 2 years of educational training, or $20,000 worth of tuition and expenses. An individual would then seek a determination from the board, and the board, prior to the individual investing time and money into the application process, will receive a determination, and then that determination could help better equip them for participating in an apprenticeship program or participating in an application for the occupational license. I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Senator Clarkson and her work on the Senator GovOps committee that led to the passage of House Bill 289, which creates the specific factors for determination for individuals with criminal records. And we are also super, super excited to work with the Maine Department of Labor this upcoming session. We are working with Representative Maggie O'Neill to further enhance or eliminate the barriers to licensure in Maine as well. So thank you for having us. And if you have any questions, here's our email addresses. And I know that we're also doing a Q&A at the end.
Okay, thank you so much, Corey. Now I will just, share my screen for the some contact information for the speakers if any of you would like to contact them after and connect. But now we will get to the 2 questions it looks like we have. The first is, does your term apprenticeship include formal education? And it looks like, Joan, you wanted to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Registered apprenticeship in the United States includes at least 144 hours of classroom training for every year of the apprenticeship program. And the classroom training can be delivered online, face-to-face in the classroom. The employer can deliver the classroom training if they have qualified instructors to do that. So absolutely, that's one of the keys to registered apprenticeship. It's not just on-the-job learning, it is supported by relevant classroom training.
Okay, did anyone else want to add anything to that question? No one? Okay, the second question looks to be possibly for anyone. It asked, how about the international trained Iraqi physicians? So if anyone has any knowledge about, I guess, apprenticeships for foreign trained professionals.
It's really a state by state decision at this point in time, which is really challenging. And I don't think there's any real ways of doing it. And as I mentioned during my presentation, we're trying to work in Maine with our licensing boards, our healthcare licensing boards, to develop pathways to licensure for foreign trained professionals, and encouraging them the use of competency-based assessment, and certainly testing out to be sure that they're competent, both on paper and in practice. But just saying that it's really difficult.
So Germany has done a really good job working with their refugee population. They've had a significant one for many years now, and they really try and assess each individual, identify the gaps in training, train to that, train in language. They do a self-assessment. They try and sync the education system with the individual's needs and address the skills and the gaps they may have. They have their biggest challenge, and it's actually one we face here in America, obviously, is the ultra right, who have fought the investment in refugee education and and apprenticeships and syncing licensure with what their foreign education, their country of origin education was, with the education system in Germany. In Vermont, we're doing the same thing. We're doing something very similar to Maine. We are working hard. This is a population full of opportunity for all of America, and it would behoove us all to figure out how to assess individuals' competencies, skills, training, do any further training to that gap of knowledge or whatever is needed for that state, and really get people working and engaged in our economy as soon as possible.
Okay, great. It looks like the next question is, can anyone speak to wage standards for apprenticeship programs funded with state dollars, meaning creating programs that pay livable wages if they receive state support to create the programs?
So in Maine, our legislature this past session just passed that in order to be eligible for an offset in the cost of the classroom training, which is afforded through our state general funds, the registered apprenticeship program has to begin at 1.25 Maine minimum wage, and it has to end at least 1.5% above minimum wage. And the other thing that I just mentioned about that is we've seen a huge uptick in the number of registered apprentices in Maine as electricians. And it's because last year the legislature passed that 10% of the workforce on jobs funded by the state had to be registered apprenticeship. And those percentages are going to go up over time. I think it goes up to 25% of the workforce on construction projects funded by the state have to be, the workforce has to include a percentage of registered apprentices. And the other good thing about registered apprenticeship, which I didn't have a chance to talk about, is that we have to send EEO standards, and sponsors or the businesses with more than 5 or more apprentices have to write out exactly what are you going to do to attract minorities, women, BIPOCs. What are you going to do that? And then we go in and monitor and look and say, where did you advertise? Show us proof that you did this. And so I think it can make a big difference. I think that apprenticeship can help to level the playing field a little bit for people who are traditionally barriered into entering into apprenticeship.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to add to that question? Okay, really quickly, I believe we have a question about how the CSG Justice Center can help states that are interested in fair chance licensing.
Yeah, of course. So right now we are working in 22 states. And we are more than happy to help any state legislators that are looking for ways to improve the licensure status for formerly incarcerated individuals through collateral consequences. We are working with a bunch of states already, and we would be more than happy to work with anyone who would like to do that. Whether it's research, whether it's connecting with other legislators, whether it's, doing presentations, we do it all. So if anyone needs help with anything, we are definitely here. And Josh and my contact information is on the screen. So definitely would love anyone who is interested to reach out to us.
Great. And it looks like we just have one more minute here, but I believe we have a raised hand. If someone would like to say something, let me see.
I'd love to, because I think Corey and Josh's work would be wonderfully partnered with what Nirav is offering, because it strikes me that these career impact bonds would be really well spent on people who are currently in our correction systems. And obviously the alumni of our correction systems could benefit as well. And I would hope that actually, to me, this is a great opportunity right here on this screen of expertise that could be melded and for a net gain to our population, because all our corrections alums are returning to our communities, and we want them. The best public safety measure is a good paying job. So it strikes me that those career impact bonds would be well spent on some of our alums of corrections and or people who are still in corrections.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's work that we're already doing in pockets like General Assembly as a specific call out for them, but I think we can be more intentional about them. That population as a pathway to getting reintegrated into the community in a stable, sustainable way.
Rob, you said you are working in Maine, so we are working in Maine as well with Representative Maggie O'Neill. So super excited, and I will be reaching out just because I think it is important. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
And Vermont would love to be included in that, because as all our states are trying to have people incarcerated for shorter periods of time and really keeping only the toughest cases in prison, we have less occupational training time in prison. So it would be great to identify an assessment system while they're in corrections, and then have those bonds and supports once they get out.
But don't forget about the work opportunity tax credit that's available for bonding for folks that are exiting prison. And we're also doing a lot of work of registered apprenticeship in the prison systems. And so the people are getting most of their classroom training completed before they're even released. And then during the pre-release, we're connecting them to apprenticeship employers. And they're starting to get some of the on-the-job learning. And also don't forget about the opportunities to apprentice right within prison walls. There's maintenance people, there's electricians, there's kitchen staff, there's, things happen within prison that people can be registered apprentices right there.
There is a whole CSG session right there. That's maybe for next year.
Maybe for next year. There's all some good ideas here, but unfortunately we're past time already. So I just want to thank all the presenters and everyone who attended, and I hope everyone has a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Caitlin.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye now.
Thanks a lot.